So that's what I'm doing. Okay, we're on our way. So any chatters out there? You guys, can you hear me okay? I hope you can hear me. Tell me who you are and where you're calling from or visiting from, or whatever. All right. Hi, Sue. Grateful for a roof over your head. That's always good, especially if it's raining like it is here. Anybody else? You guys can hear me okay, right? I'm beginning to realize that I meant to tell or ask Heather to make these, make it a meeting so we could talk. We no longer have to do webinars. So probably the next time we do this, we'll do it as a meeting. That way I don't have to sort of be talking to the screen, and hopefully people can hear me. There's Sarah. Good. Working from home creates a hard balance. Doing all we can for our museum, but also to take care of yourself. Yeah, right. Work-life balance has now become work-life integration. We can't escape it. For sure. Okay. Anybody else want to say hi? Where you're from? What's going on with you? Hey, Steve. Claudia. Miami. All right. Positive doctor's appointment. Yes, very nice. Good. Whatever was ailing you, I'm glad it's okay. Is it raining in Miami? Never rains in Miami. No, hurricanes in Miami. Of course it does. It's California. They don't get rain. Okay. Well, we're going to get started today, and I'm very, very grateful that you're here with us, and glad that you're able to take a little time out of your day to talk about mindfulness and get a grip on what's going on inside of you and so forth. So I hope this is productive. Any of you guys have been here with us before. Typically the format is, I'm going to just kind of riff a little bit. I've been thinking about a few things since we talked the last time, anybody that was on the last call, and then we'll do a little bit of a meditation and then kind of chat a little bit about whatever's on your mind, any question that I can answer for you, or thoughts that I can give you on anything. I'm happy to do that. So I guess in terms of the riff, I've been thinking a little bit about, since we talked the last time, the feeling of time is really kind of crazy, isn't it? I mean, we're kind of in this new dimension of time. On the one hand, it seems like it's really slowed down, time, that is, during these days of quarantine, at least for me anyway. We've developed these sort of new routines around the house, and hopefully awareness of the small details of our spaces in our lives, and finding myself just being fascinated with, stuff that I never really even paid attention to before. The fact that, the toaster works in a particular way, browns the toast a little bit more on this side than that side. That's kind of cool. So, you get into these small details. It's been great to be able to actually make breakfast without rushing off to a commute. You kind of linger over the paper. I've been listening to a lot of birds. I've noticed a lot more wildlife around here than ever before. And it's probably because I haven't really paid attention, haven't been, spending a lot of time here at breakfast. I'm usually rushing off, getting ready to go for my hour commute to Arlington. So I don't have the hour commute. I'm able to sort of focus in on some details. So anyway, time's gotten, a little bit slower, a little more relaxed in some ways. On the other hand, it just seems that time has been totally accelerated. And by that, I'm thinking that every day almost seems to wash away what the prior day brought. And we've got ushered in sort of these unexpected, and lately, when you read the news, unwelcome set of new circumstances. And certainly since our last mindfulness meetup about 2 weeks ago, that's happened, because the killing of George Floyd has made the pandemic and the economic devastation that we've been worried about sort of passé. Who thought about this actually happening? But all of a sudden, since the last couple of weeks, we've had nationwide outrage and anger, and chaos and riots, and not just in our cities, but even in the small towns around the country, and had, you know, this sort of strange scenes of troops occupying the Lincoln Memorial, and walls and fences going up around the White House and so forth, and talk about battle spaces in our streets by the Secretary of Defense. It's just kind of crazy. Helicopters. And I take this somewhat personally in a sense, because Washington, D.C. is like one of my favorite places to visit. I visit there on business more than just about anywhere else, you know, because I'm doing a lot of lobbying and, well, advocacy, you know, on behalf of the museum field. Anyway, a lot of these places that I know very well, here we are, Lafayette Park. You know, it's like these crazy scenes of, you know, rioting and police and troops and the like. So you just kind of wonder, like, what's happening to us? You know? In the days following George Floyd's murder, I guess, you know, the thing that well, all organizations, including NEMA, felt the need to issue statements of sympathy and support to the protests. And, you know, we were no differently. We, you know, sort of had a number of folks, ourselves, included our staff, you know, we need to do something. So we issued a statement, and, you know, supporting the generally museums being much more open to opposing racial injustice and the like. And of course, every other museum association had some kind of a statement, and many museums did, and all that. I guess, you know, I'm finding myself a little bit ambivalent about all this, though, because these statements I think are absolutely necessary, and they're valuable for our organizations to stake out the ground of resistance and to go on the record with our values. I believe that. But there's also this feeling in me that's kind of unsettling, that at the end of the day, they're sort of like those thoughts and prayers statements that are made after, you know, mass shootings and the like. Do they actually accomplish anything? Coming from institutions in our museum field, which many of them are founded on white privilege, and they perpetuate the scaffolding of racist violence, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, aren't those statements profoundly disingenuous in some ways? So there's kind of this, you know, unsettled feeling. So I did some work, as I'm apt to do, on the inside, as I was checking in with my own emotions in those days immediately following George Floyd's murder. I realized I had a great deal of anger in me, and I sat with the anger a little bit, and I tried to get a feel for it. And I understood it to be a different kind of anger than what I normally feel. Normally, you know, if I get angry, it's usually when somebody does something to me that I perceive to be an attack on me personally and the like. And you know, this was a little bit different. It was more of a generalized anger at the injustices of the system, of which I'm a beneficiary, kind of anger at our historical racism, anger at my white privilege, anger at my impotence to actually make a difference. All those things were kind of floating around in the background there. And, you know, it was kind of a hard thing. It was more anger of general causes than it was over anything specifically. And I think that, you know, in talking with folks that I know and trust, I think so many of us are at a loss to about how to respond effectively to that anger about this. You know, some folks join in protests, some engage in a new phrase that I learned, rage philanthropy. It's like, you know, the idea that I'm so angry, I'm going to donate my money to candidates and causes and so forth. Some people just simply want to crawl into a hole because they're overwhelmed. It's all, you know, all these reactions are very understandable, I think, when it comes right down to it. Ram Dass, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Ram Dass. He's a guru that died actually recently. I think it was earlier this year. He was about 90 years old or so. But he once had I think a really great phrase for this, a little bit of a thought. And he said once, even though we find ourselves afraid and not feeling peaceful and less than fully loving and compassionate, we must act. There is no way you can be in an incarnation without acting. We can't wait until we're enlightened to act. We all hear the way in which our silence is itself an act of acquiescence to a system. That is as much an action as walking. That is acquiescence, quietness. That's still an act. Since we must act, we must do the best we can to act consciously and compassionately. But in addition, we can make every action an exercise designed to help us become free, because the truth that comes from freedom, and the power that comes from freedom, and the love and compassion that come from freedom are the jewels we can cultivate to offer to our fellow sentient beings for the relief of their suffering. So I thought that was pretty apt when I read that. You know, to be silent is itself an act. We have to do something. And I feel that really does encapsulate a lot of the way many of us are feeling. What do we do that's effective, more than just simply thoughts and prayers and, you know, that type of a thing? So those of us who are white, Caucasians, want to know, how can we be helpful allies ultimately? There's an uncertainty about how we should approach this moment. There may be even feelings of shame for our white privilege, which I mentioned before. That sense of our privilege, we're somewhat shameful about that. There's an inner conflict knowing that we have a complicity in some direct and indirect manner, complicity in George Floyd's murder, and yet we want to do something about it beyond those thoughts and prayers type of statements. So certainly something that's on our mind. I think the solution for a lot of us is we try to build empathy. We try really hard to express empathy. We imagine what it's like to be someone like George Floyd, who is a victim of racial oppression. He was killed because of his skin color. We try real hard to feel the feelings of Black folks or brown folks or folks of any other color but white, those of us who are white. And of course, if you are a person of color, it's like whatever the other is in this case. But we try to feel empathy. We try to understand. We walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. Every day, folks like George Floyd, though, live in this country as the other. I'll never forget a conversation I had with a friend of mine, Dr. Gretchen Soren. Anybody know Gretchen? She's runs the Cooperstown Graduate Program, and she's one of the most prominent museum leaders, I think, in the country today. And if you were at last year's NEMA conference, you would have hopefully heard her keynote presentation about her new book called Driving While Black. And I'll never forget, she one time told me in a conversation, she said, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, that is academic degrees, or what you've accomplished. When you're Black, you never know what's in store for you when you get behind the wheel of your car. And that's the whole thesis of that book, Driving While Black. Just, you never know what's going to happen when you're driving through, you know, a white portion of town or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what you accomplished and so forth. And of course, we heard this, you know, the Central Park birder to, you know, George Floyd. I mean, it just seems to be piling up over and over again. So we try to be empathetic. And empathy is helpful because it gets us out of our own skins and it allows us to feel the suffering of others. But in a way, it only goes so far. Empathy is sort of like that thoughts and prayers statement type of thing. It communicates, I'm thinking of you, but it doesn't actually work towards any kind of solutions. Compassion, on the other hand, is empathy in action. And I want to talk a minute about compassion, because I think that this is the key to actually helping us individually and collectively make a difference in what is basically an intractable situation in a big way. So compassion, empathy in action. Compassion takes empathy really to the next level. When you have compassion, you're saying, I feel your pain and I'm willing to do something about it. Willing to act on it. Cultivating compassion is one of the highest virtues in many, many religious traditions, and of course in you know, secular traditions too. So it's called karuna in Sanskrit. Earlier this week, I read about a person named Ibram X. Kendi, who is one of the country's foremost scholars on racism, and he's actually coming to Boston University this fall. He's going to start working in Boston, which I'm really looking forward to. I hope I get to meet him at some point. He's launching something at BU. It's called the BU Center for Anti-Racist Research. And he's got a book out called How to Be an Anti-Racist, which I haven't read yet, but I for sure put it on my book list. And the book seems to address the issue of what a white person like me, or anyone for that matter, can do to help the cause. According to the Boston Globe article I read about it, they said at the center of the book is the idea that racism must be actively opposed to be eradicated, that it's not enough, as many white people assume, to simply not hold obviously racist beliefs. So Kendi says in this article, I think you have a large number of white people who have come to realize that racism is rotting their country. They value their country, and I think they value Black lives, and they value their own lives because they see and are recognizing how the police at these protests are brutalizing even them in the way they brutalized the lives of Black people before the protests. They're upset about it, and they're protesting against it. So one's personal road to anti-racism proceeds in stages, and Kendi lays out the steps. So first he says, is you have to stop using the I am not a racist defense. He says, confess the racist policies and ideas you support and express. Fight for anti-racist power and policies in spaces you can influence. Join an anti-racist organization or protest. Donate time and money. That's that rage philanthropy. Note the places where racist ideas intersect with other forms of bigotry. And finally, learn to recognize and reject racist policies and generalizations. For us white folk, these action steps, I think, all follow from the compassion we cultivate within us, understanding that the anger we feel right now when we contemplate George Floyd's murder is really an expression of love in some ways. It's love for the other. It's love for our country and our culture, even with all of its evils and sins and so forth. And ultimately, it's the love that motivates us to be allies to change. And it's not the anger that motivates us, it's the love. So for me, I think the idea that was expressed in that article that has the most resonance is the idea to fight for anti-racist power in the spaces that we can influence. Spaces we can influence. So I've thought a lot about that since I read it. And I think that's really the first step for all of us, to get in touch with our own spaces of influence. And what does that mean? Essentially, to recognize our privilege and to take ownership of it by turning it toward justice. So in my case, as the director of NEMA, I've got a certain amount of, what do you want to call it, a bully pulpit and political capital, maybe social capital, that I intend to use the way I can moving forward. And I'd invite each of you to do the same. Contemplate, what is your space of influence? Whether it's in your own museum, social grouping, family grouping, those kinds of things. Where do I have my space of influence, and what can I do, even the smallest piece, so that I can dedicate myself to making the world a better place through that space, large or small. So I've got a little reading here that I want to share with you before we move on to our meditation, and it's from a book called Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's one of my favorites, very inspirational writer. And it's a little section that I came across as I was thinking about all this, and it's called A Revolution of Compassion. Revolution of Compassion. So he says, we all have original fear in us, but it's not just we as individuals who are afraid. Many countries and regions of the world are burning with fear, suffering, and hatred. If only to ease our own suffering, we have to return to ourselves and seek to understand why we are caught up in so much violence and fear. What has caused terrorists, for example, to hate so much that they are willing to sacrifice their own lives and create so much suffering for other people? We see their great hatred, but what is driving it? Behind it is perceived injustice. Of course, we have to find a way to stop the violence. We may even need to keep people separated while they are still a danger to others, but we also need to ask, what responsibility do we have for the injustice in the world? We do not like feeling afraid. Often if we hold on to our fear, it turns into anger. We are angry that we are afraid. We're angry at whatever or whomever we perceive is causing our fear and keeping us afraid. Some people spend their whole lives trying to take revenge on whatever or whomever they think caused their suffering. This kind of motivation can only bring suffering, not only to others, but also to the one who feels it. Hatred, anger, and fear are like burning fires that can be put out by compassion. But where do we find compassion? It isn't sold in the supermarket. If it were, we would only need to bring it home and we could dissolve all the hatred and violence in the world very easily. The compassion can only be produced in our own heart and by our own practice. Sometimes someone we love, our child, our spouse, or our parent, says something cruel and we feel hurt. We think it's only we who suffer, but the other person is suffering as well. If he weren't suffering, he wouldn't have spoken or acted in a way that hurt us. The person we love hasn't seen a way to transform his suffering, so he just pours out all of his fear and anger on us. Our responsibility is to produce the energy of compassion that first calms down our heart and then allows us to help the other person. If we punish the other person, he will just suffer more and the cycle will continue. Responding to violence with violence can only bring more violence, more injustice, and more suffering, not only to the ones we seek to punish, but also to ourselves. This wisdom is in every one of us. When we breathe deeply, we can touch this seed of wisdom in us. I know that if the energy of wisdom and compassion in all people could be nourished for even 1 week, it would reduce the level of fear, anger, and hatred in the world. I urge us all to practice calming and concentrating our minds, watering the seeds of wisdom and compassion that are already there in us, and learning the art of mindful consumption. If we can do this, we will create a true peaceful revolution, the only kind of revolution that can help us out of this difficult situation. So, revolution of compassion, very interesting. How many of us have noticed that when we are angry and consumed with anger and hatred and so forth, and we spill it forward, it feels kind of good in the moment to let it all go. But we recognize in the long run that it really doesn't do anything more than damage our own sense of ourselves, our own integrity, and it damages our relationships, of course. So compassion is really, one of those tickets that is going to, help us, I think. The last time we did this, our mindful session, we talked about gratitude being, an antidote to a lot of things. And this is related, the art of practicing compassion. I think it's got a lot to offer us, both for ourselves and of course for society. So I want to think a little bit here about tee up our meditation for a second. And one of the fundamental ways to develop compassion in your practice is to do what's known as Metta Meditation, which is loving kindness. M-E-T-T-A, Metta. It's one of the 4 big virtues of Buddhism. Gratitude being one that we practiced the last time, and loving kindness is the other one. And it really is a sense of providing others with your own sense of love and kindness and compassion and relationships and so forth. One of the exercises that I would encourage you to do, not just in meditation, but to actually develop a sense of, how do I feel compassionate about folks who are not of my skin color, who I have identified as the other perhaps, that hidden bias and overt bias that we perhaps get ourselves into. And it's really helpful to sort of think a little bit about those folks that, not in the general way, not Black people or brown people or, whatever the sense of the other is, but really particular folks that you come in contact with. Maybe you know them directly. Maybe you only know them marginally. They're folks that are kind of neutral to you. They're the people in the grocery store that do your checkout, or the person at the gas station, or those kinds of things. But take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, And on the left-hand side, think of those people very, very specifically and write down who they are. If you know their names, great. If you don't, person, woman at gas station, man in the supermarket checkout, whatever it is. But really picture that person carefully. See that person as you've seen them many, many times perhaps, or interacted with them. And on the right side of the paper, set an intention of how you would like to better relate to that person somehow. What would you do? Is it simply, I'm going to make an intention that the next time I see that person, I'm going to say hi and smile to them? Am I going to ask them how their day is? Am I going to engage them a little bit more with something that perhaps makes their day a little bit better? But try to figure out what it is that you're going to do to actually relate to that person a little bit more. Somebody who is the other, somebody that is different from you. It's also easy for us to just kind of go along with our group, our in-group, whatever that is that we identify with. It's very comfortable that way, but it's uncomfortable to kind of get out of our skins and take the risk of interacting with somebody who's not like us. But do that. Try to, come up with some very, very specific measures that you're going to take to see whether you can understand that person a little bit more, to understand what their life is all about, to try to create within you the sense that we're not all that different. Because ultimately, I think that, what it boils down to is that we have to be effective in breaking down those boundaries. We fundamentally have to believe that we are the same people as those other folks. The Dalai Lama always points out that people are fundamentally the same. All they want, two things basically. They want to avoid suffering and they want happiness. And that's everybody. And it doesn't matter, where you are, who you are, or whatever, it's avoiding suffering and happiness. We all breathe together. And the more that you can kind of understand people as people and not sort of abstract others, it really helps. So in our meditation we're going to do now, I'm going to invite you to consider this, and we're going to say a few phrases of loving kindness. And the phrases for loving kindness, for me anyway, and you can make up your own, but I always, there are thoughts of like what you wish for somebody. Mine are always, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and live with ease. And you do this classically through a progression of you wish yourself loving kindness, because it all starts in here. And then you wish somebody that's a support to you, a love, or somebody close to you, you wish them loving kindness, and you sort of expand out your community. And then you go to somebody neutral, and then ultimately you think about people you dislike and you wish them loving kindness. Similar to what we did the last time about gratitude. You're grateful for all the people that are different from you politically. So what we're going to do this time, though, is we're going to actually start out the meditation with ourselves and maybe, somebody we love. But then we're going to be thinking about those neutral people, those others, the people that we don't really fully know, but we're going to wish them loving kindness as well. So all that, those lists of people that you're maybe thinking of right now that you want to perhaps reach out to at some point, we're going to use those as our meditation objects. So I invite you to find a comfortable spot to be sitting, get a posture that's comfortable for you, sitting in your chair, anchor your feet on the ground. Let's take a couple of deep cleansing breaths and release. Another deeper breath and exhale. Maybe one more. Now just breathe normally. Let the breaths come. Greet yourself a little bit with a bit of happiness. Smile to yourself. Say hello. I'm here as you breathe. Notice your breath, of course, as it comes in, and you feel the coolness of the in-breath in your nostrils and the little bit of warmth as it's exiting your nostrils. And the exhale, you feel your belly rising and falling. Pay attention just for the moment on how gravity is pulling you into the chair or onto your cushion or wherever you happen to be seated. Feel your body's weight as it's contacting the seat, your rear end as it's sitting there. You notice the contact there. You notice the contact of your feet on the floor. You notice your hands, whether they're folded in your lap or touching your legs or wherever they are. Notice your hands contacting your body. Do a little scan and see if there are any places in your body that are a little bit tensed up. Just be aware of that. Maybe your jaw a little bit, maybe your back, maybe your hands are clenched just a little bit. Try to relax all those. Relax your jaw. Wiggle it around a little. Let it relax. See if you can feel your clothing contact your skin. Pay attention to that. So I want you to really think carefully now of smiling to yourself. Think about yourself as a warm and happy being. Maybe you can think of some of the things that you're grateful for at this moment. Put yourself in a very calm and happy state of mind and see yourself sitting there and give yourself a little love. You might use the phrases that I always use and love. You might say to yourself, I am whole, I am complete, and I'm enough. You may want to put your hand on your chest or on your arm if that sort of seals the deal for you. Gives you a little bit more of a sense of I'm giving myself a little self-love, a little compassion. And as you're feeling all that warm fuzziness for yourself, let's think those phrases of loving kindness to ourself. You're offering yourself the loving kindness by saying, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, and live with ease. We can say it again. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy and live with ease. Pay attention to how you feel if you say that. Hopefully you feel very connected with yourself, creating a positive feedback loop, improving your relationship with yourself. And now I invite you to call to mind somebody that you care for a lot, you feel very positively for, that they've helped you and you help them in a very positive relationship, somebody you're close to. Bring them to mind, see their face. You might imagine them seated right there across from you. You give them a smile. You feel those warm, positive feelings for them. And you express your loving kindness to them with the words, "May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy and live with ease." Pay attention to how you feel now. Do you feel those warm fuzzies with them? Do you feel as though your relationship with them is strong and loving and caring? Let's try someone else that's also in your care and that cares about you. Imagine them seated across from you. You smile at them. And you give them the words of loving kindness. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be safe. And may you live with ease. And note how you're feeling about them. Do you feel warm? Do you feel that your relationship with them is stronger by saying this? And now call to mind one of those folks that you perhaps have been thinking about, that you're somewhat neutral about, but they're definitely the other. They're a person that's completely different from you, whether it's skin color or a belief system of some kind or appearance, sexual orientation, whatever it might be. They're different from you. You don't really understand them. You don't know them, perhaps. Call them to mind, though, that specific person that you've seen before. You call them to mind, and they're seated right across from you, looking at you. and you give them the words of loving kindness. May you be safe. May you live with ease. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And how do you feel when you say these words? Do you feel warm the same way you felt warm when you gave the loving kindness to someone you know and love? How is it different? What's happening inside of you when you do that? Do you feel as though your relationship with that person is different and stronger? Maybe you offer those words again to just see how it goes. To deepen your understanding of your own reactions, you say the words of loving kindness again to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy and live with ease. Perhaps there's another person who you've identified as an other. Put that person in your mind and seat them across from you. Picture their faces, picture their skin, picture their demeanors, their posture. Hear their own breathing, perhaps. Feel their warmth near you. And you offer them the words of loving kindness. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy and live with ease. Sense how you're feeling about this person. Do you feel warm? Do you feel your relationship is strengthened with that person? So, I invite you to slowly open your eyes, move around a little bit in your chairs, and come back to reality here a little bit. Thank you for doing that with me. That's great. And I'd encourage you to dig in on this a little bit, because I've been doing a little bit of this work in my practice as well, just, trying to reach out, trying to understand, not just empathy, but trying to find that sense of compassion, the caring and concern that goes with really, truly trying to understand someone. We don't fully understand anyone, of course. And of course, when you offer loving kindness, that person doesn't hear it directly. But what it does is it reorients you. It creates a new possibility for a relationship within you, and it helps you, each one of us, to to better get clear on what it is our own motivations and intentions are and our capabilities, and it helps us set the bigger intention of what can we do. So if it's just simply reaching out to an individual person to try to understand them better, in the end, if we each do that kind of a thing, that helps us overcome the racism that's part of our system. It's going to give us a stake in making some kind of positive change, and it's going to help us find those spaces of influence that I read about that are, I think, so important. What are the spaces of influence that we can bring to things, and what can we do about it? I think that's all we can do ultimately. Okay, folks, we got a couple of minutes here, 15 it looks like, and let's hear what's on your mind. Any questions, any thoughts? I'm checking the chat here for this. Huh, Emily. Hey, Emily. Yeah, Gretchen. I'm a big fan of hers. Susan, thanks for talking about anger today. I needed to hear that passage. Yeah, anger has been crazy lately. So come on, folks, what's on your minds? How are things in Miami? Has there been rioting in Miami? I have not heard about rioting in Miami, but I'm sure there has been. Okay, what's going on here? Am I lagging? Emily, since we last met, much internal institutional work to craft a statement about racial injustice. Yeah, I saw yours. It was well done. Have all of our institutions done this by now? I'm sure everybody has. And I didn't mean to offend anybody by saying that they were, sort of thoughts and prayers kinds of things, but it's made me think about what our, effectiveness is in that regard. So Emily says, and now I see so many others, and I've had much sympathy for colleagues and friends who've done the same work, and now we see a lot of pushback on social media channels, at least. Oh, pushback meaning that the statements themselves don't go far enough. I know it can be very, very confusing, I think. Yeah. I grew up in a part of the country, not here, I grew up in the Midwest, and, well, St. Louis, however you define that. St. Louis has always been sort of in this liminal zone of north and south. And I remember as a kid, growing up in the St. Louis suburbs, of course, we didn't at the time recognize anything in terms of people being racist or not. And I guess as you're growing up, you don't notice these things. But I do remember it shook me when I would go visit relatives down in Southern Illinois. And Southern Illinois is like not quite deep south, but it's this little tip, and it's surrounded by Arkansas on one side. Let's see, I'm looking at you. Arkansas on this side, and Tennessee and Kentucky on this side. So Illinois kind of juts down in there. So it's very much south of the Mason-Dixon line. And I remember the casual racism that my relatives used to just, drop the N-word, their whole attitudes. And they were, nice people. And it was not like they were, I mean, if you ask them, are you a racist? Absolutely not. But I mean, the whole just attitude was racism. I mean, they used the N-word, but it was like, what's the problem? That's the way, that's the way we talk. It's like, wow. And I remember even at a young age, it was just shocking. But it's the casual racism that I don't know whether that's changed there. I haven't seen them in years. but we all have it in some ways. That's what I recognize, even up here in the north. You know, crazy. Feeling optimistic, Claudia says, about this wave of change. The pandemic might have set us up for introspection. Absolutely. We're trapped in our houses here, right? So it's all we can do is introspect. It's indeed a time for change. Like you and others are saying, it needs to be with intention and action. Yeah, thank you, Claudia. And Emily says, I think it's part of what's driving me to feel like I need to be more intentional and take more action. This week, we went to a BLM vigil here in Watertown and plan to go to a pride parade in Belmont on Saturday, but trying to balance my drive to take those actions without, the constant undercurrent of fear about COVID-19, right? I mean, it's so crazy, right? We want to go out and do stuff, but you're also fearful for your personal safety. The one thing that I would remind us of is, there are a lot of thoughts and emotions that are going on now. I pointed that out at the beginning. And so things like that, you want to do something, but you're afraid of your own personal safety. And I don't know if you're like me, but a lot of times you end up then berating yourself for not having enough courage or not having enough this or that. And how come I can't do that? And you find yourself in this cycle then of negative self-talk. It's called the second arrow. Have I talked about the second arrow? The second arrow, the first arrow is just the suffering that's happening to you, whatever, you're upset and angry about something. That's the first arrow in your heart. But you put your second arrow in yourself by berating yourself and like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way and whatever. And not that that's what you were suggesting, Emily, but we need to be very mindful of doing that second arrow thing. It's hard enough coping with the crazy emotions and feelings we've got that are just coming into us and creating suffering and stress and whatever. Hard enough time dealing with that without putting our own arrow into the wound. And you have to be mindful of that. Very much so. Susan's got to get ready for our next meeting. See you next time. Steve, I wish my space of influence was wider, but our museums can be powerful spaces of influence, and I feel hopeful that everyone is on board. Yeah. Well, that's what I love about working in the museum field, honestly, is that, sometimes we forget about it, but we actually hold so much power in our own communities and with people, and power in a good way. It's like we influence people. People love museums. We're one of the highest trusted groups in our society. And so let's own that. Let's take advantage of that by speaking the truth to power. Let's try to, use those spaces the best we can. I know we are. I know we're trying to do better. It's interesting in this moment too. We've been talking about a lot of this, racial justice, social justice for years and years and years, and a lot of talk. And I'm thinking about NEMA conferences, the number of sessions that we've had for years on the subject. I would dare say that this seems as though it's different. It's definitely got a feeling of a turning point in some ways. And I don't know why that is, except that the egregiousness of George Floyd's murder, I think, might have had something to do with it. Maybe it was just finally, this is the moment. I'm hoping that it's not a Sandy Hook thing where I think we were all hoping that Sandy Hook was going to sort of change the tide with gun control, and then it didn't. But who knows? We're focused now. Well, folks, one thing that I wanted to bring up to you, because as I said at the outset, I'm a little bit, this is somewhat awkward doing these webinar styles with small groups of people doing meditation. I want to change this over to a meeting, which I intend to do the next time, and I hope you can join us. One thing that I've been toying with actually for some time is creating a museum mindfulness community of practice, which, has a little bit more, structure, regularity, something like that. And, I know that some of y'all have been on multiples of these calls and are kind of into this. And I wanted to explore the idea with you about whether you might be interested in doing something on a more regular basis and a more intentional basis and on a more personal interactive basis with each other to support each other's practices and to support each other's lives as museum people and those kinds of things. And I'd like to see if we, if we're interested in pulling something together. I currently do a community of practice with first-time executive directors of small museums, and we've been meeting for a little over a year. We meet once a month, and it's a great peer support kind of a thing where we're exploring the idea of leadership in museums. And this is the same kind of a thing possibly, where we're just simply, we don't have to be, at the CEO level or whatever. It's just, we're museum people and we're trying to do it in a mindful way, whatever we do in our institutions or whatever. So I could see, having us get together on a fairly regular basis, if you were interested in doing that. If you are, let me know. Either email me or, if you got to throw it in the chat. Yes, Claudia, do it. Yay. And I'll sort of see what the interest is, and we'll see if we can pull together a group that can kind of meet and interact a little bit more, so that it's not quite as whatever, me talking to myself on the screen. So yeah, or email me. You can get my email on the website nemanet.org, or just go to Dan. Actually, let me put it in the chat here. You can email me. Can I spell my name right? At nemanet.org. Did I get that right? Dan. Yeah, there we go. Right. So yeah, just email me and let me know that you're interested, and we'll see what we can do. Putting this together. All right, folks. It's been great to be with you today. Hopefully you got as much out of it as I did being with you. Hope to see you next time. Hope maybe we can create a group. That'd be great. If you got anything in the meantime that you want to bring up to me, email me. If you have any emergencies, any things that you got to get off your chest, things that are worrying you, let me know. I'm happy to help anytime. Okay. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Take it easy. Have compassion.